So I've been slowly going through all of the short stories from a canceled monster romance back in 2021. I'm going to go ahead and link to Izzy's video from Happy for Now, Romancelandia, and it'll be up in the card here, as well as down in the description below. But the long and the short of it is that popular indie romance author R.M. Virtues proposed the idea of a monster romance anthology, and Violet Gaze Press went ahead and agreed to host that anthology. The two of them collaborated for a little while, and eventually the partnership broke apart. And when R.M. Virtues spoke out about why he felt he had been cut off from the project and ended up canceling the whole thing. So it was a shame because I thought the idea of a monster romance anthology was just like a really good one. In 2021, monster romance was blowing up and having a moment. Thanks to the resurgence of stuff like Ice Planet Barbarians over on Book Talk, it just had really gotten a lot of traction and attention and seemed to be exploding in popularity way past what the barriers of that genre had classically been. And that was really exciting for me in particular because while I don't know how I feel about like monster romance as a genre as a whole, I had a lot of fun with the Ice Planet Barbarian series. I'd be able to tell from my 6-book series like Ice Planet Barbarians video here that I enjoyed the monstery nature of the romance and all of the like fun flair enough that I was looking for other books that were kind of like it and was just like enjoying a moment. And a bunch of short stories monster romance themes seemed perfect because it would give me a taste of a lot of different authors without forcing me to commit to like a 30-book series. So not one to let a anthology being canceled stop me from getting my hands on these stories. Izzy from Happy for Now also has another video where she also reads the canceled anthology, and she links to every single book that was submitted or supposedly supposed to be part of the anthology. There are 18 books that she's linking to, and I was only able to get through 15 of them. Even though this has been a year for me to read a lot of short stories and anthology works, I do find reading short stories sometimes are really hard for me. I don't know what about it is so different than reading novels or series, but when it's only 30 pages, if I'm not really liking it or I'm not really feeling any investment, I just like get stuck and have a hard time with it. I am not going to go through and individually rate and review every single one of these short stories on the Monster Anthology. I am going to link to all 18 books in the description below, and I'll have the ones I read and the ones I didn't read separated. I just want to talk about the top 3 in my reading experience, the bottom 3 in my reading experience, and a couple conclusions we can draw about what I'm looking for in monster romance. So starting with my top 3 favorites, number 3 is going to be Love, Laugh, Leech by Katie Pryor. I really enjoyed this. It was a funny, laugh out loud, lighthearted kind of read. The basic world building premise here is like the dark, big muckawump actually wins the battle and takes over the world. We're looking at it specifically like in a corporate setting. So it's like your basic standard mega corporation, except the CEO is the Lich King who rules the world, which right away I loved how that was like some biting commentary on capitalism. Very little changes in our world day-to-day running if a Lich King is the CEO or if there's a benevolent human CEO. Certainly when people are fired from this company, instead of getting to look for a job elsewhere, they get damned straight to a pit of hell. Our protagonist is like a secretary slash personal assistant for the Lich King. She ends up like getting closer to him and slowly building a relationship with him. Something else I really liked about this specific story is it's got like a very late 90s, early 2000 rom-com kind of feel. So it's light and it's funny. The structure is very familiar. I found the love interest to be quirky and offbeat and fun, and she was perfect for a novella length. I think if I'd had to hang out with her any longer, I would have found her a little bit annoying. I think we've established for me that romance as a category is a character study and about relationships. I'm not here for the sex scenes or for any of the kink or any stuff like that, so you just do you on that part, and I'm gonna keep reading through for relationship building points. But if you are here in the monster romance category for the exotic, Love, Laugh, Lich has 2 or 3 steamy scenes in it, and they're all different. It's not like a repeat of the same performance, and there is some monstery element that comes into play if you're looking for that. I don't know, arguably Fear in Other Languages by Avita Weiss should be here taking up the number 3rd spot, but I just had so much fun and like was laughing and enjoying my time so much in Love, Laugh, Lich that it beats it out, even though I would say that Fear and Other Love Languages should get an honorable mention. It's got better writing, creepier atmosphere, and overall has like some deeper things going on that are more interesting, but I just didn't have as much fun with it as I did this one. Number 2 is going to be Sing Me to Sleep by R.M. Virtues. The good news for me is that this novella stems off a series, so I can keep reading this and enjoying future installments in it. And I probably am going to continue the series because I had a really good time with these characters and the world building, and I'm interested in where that goes from here. I think one of the things I really like about Sing Me to Sleep is that it takes some pretty serious subject matter and some heavier beats and weaves them into a love story in a way that I think works well and is moving without feeling like jarring or an awkward kind of tonal shift or push going on. The monster is a sleep paralysis demon and he changes shapes a lot, and I found that to be really interesting. The other thing I liked about this narrative is it's really doing two things at once. It's giving us like this personal trauma recovery story for our main protagonist, but there's also this larger world, things happening in the world around her story that's unfolding before us as we learn more about how the sleep paralysis demons exist in our world, why they're not more known to us, how our protagonist is able to interact with her specific demon, and whether or not other humans can do that or not. Like, we're also finding out about like this war between the demons and the angels and how it's been a cold war, and suddenly it's like flaring up to actual fighting, drawing me in for more in the series. In that way, it's got like a really big Ice Planet Barbarian vibe because each individual book is about that specific pairing and their relationship, but there are other elements of the story in the world that are happening around them. And since that's something I enjoyed so much in Ice Planet Barbarians, I'm really liking the vibe and the setup I'm getting here in Sing Me to Sleep with R.M. Virtues too. While the relationship between our protagonist and the monster happens like hard and fast, which usually I like a little bit more trust building or connecting moments, they do such a good job supporting each other and understanding each other and being there for each other and meeting each other on their own terms that I bought the romance and the relationship regardless of how quickly it formed. And as far as steamy scenes go, if you're looking for that, Sing Me to Sleep has a lot more of them than Love, Laugh, Lich did. At least in my recollection, it felt like that. Maybe they just went on longer. These scenes specifically tackle consensual non-consent. I think it was depicted in a way that was generally healthy if that's your thing. I ended up skimming a lot of the scenes personally, so I can't give you too many details on them, but they're there. They were well written from what I read, and they seemed to be doing what they needed to do. Also, the monster elements were unique in that regard too, and they did come into play. And my number one favorite of this monster anthology is going to be Mirror Monster on My Wall by Tam and Nevin, or Nijin. Sorry, I know I'm not pronouncing that very well. I loved this story. It was like a dark and twisted fairy tale mashup, part Alice in Wonderland, part Cinderella. And so you guys know this isn't just a monster romance, it's also a why choose story. So there are multiple romance partners involved with our protagonist Alice. And I think it's a lot more poly than it is why choose because it seems like these monsters also have relationships with each other as well. Monsters here are like a 30 on the monstrous scale as far as I'm concerned. They are described with like mandibles and are very like insect-like and possibly xenomorph-like. The author was very descriptive, and for me, that was a little too much. And the steamy scenes here were just like, I don't know, jaw-dropping, confusing for me. I really skipped those. But our main character, Alice, seems to be both neurodiverse and physically disabled in some ways. So like her perspective and her narrative and how she experiences the world in this like fairy tale mashup is really interesting and was bringing something new and special and gave me a lot of things to think about. And I empathized with her a lot. I really enjoyed her character and her struggle, and I found the ending of this to be both dark and cathartic. And all of that is just really my jam. I loved all of it so much. It was just bringing so much goodness. Moving into my bottom 3 reads, sitting at number 3 is going to be Yuri and the Yeti by Daphne Green. Really, my issues with this is that Yuri is such a sad boy, and I found him really annoying. If you don't like the main character in a romance story, you're not really rooting for them to get their happy ending. I don't like characters that are sad and melancholy and kind of wallow in it, and I especially hate it when they're what I consider to be self-indulgent. His relationship with that person didn't make any sense to me, and I kind of resented Yuri for how he went about having that relationship with that person. He knew perfectly well that person was studying to be a doctor and wanted to go into the Doctors Without Borders program and didn't plan to keep dating Yuri when that happened. And Yuri still put his whole life on hold to help support this person, and for some reason expected this person to continue to date them even though they were really clear about their expectations. I don't know what Yuri expected to change, the way he thought that he could change or control others by like supporting them, or like he was entitled to something because of that support. It was gross to me. I didn't like any of it, and it left such a bad taste in my mouth. The other thing I didn't like about this book is like the way the Yeti was portrayed was kind of like this lighthearted, jokey, like secret civilization that no one knows about, but it's like tongue-in-cheek, kind of funny, like played not very seriously, which I'm fine with. That works for me in monster romances if you want to go that way. But it was very jarring then for Yuri to be talking about visas and his visa expiring and him being afraid that if he does ever get out of this cave, he'll go to jail. I feel like you get to do one or the other. Number 2 is going to be Strange Worlds by Kat Turner. I was really looking forward to Strange Worlds. It was on my list even before I found out it was part of this canceled monster anthology. So I think some of my disappointment comes from like high expectations just not being met in the story. This book tries really hard to convey a spacey, dreamlike, surreal quality in a lot of its scenes, and it doesn't work for me at all. When so much of the story hinges on these like dream, vision, altered state of mind / reality, and it doesn't pull it off, it's hard to like the story. The relationship between our protagonist and the aliens, it happens way too quickly and it's way too high stakes. So that put me on edge, and it especially like rubbed me the wrong way because our protagonist had just got out of a long-term marriage relationship where her partner was an alcoholic and was mistreating her. She should be spreading her wings and exploring herself and getting her freedom and going into an immediate committed relationship where she has to jump worlds to be part of the relationship just struck me as like red flags. So like I was also worrying a lot for the protagonist while all this was happening. If you're busy worrying about the protagonist, you're probably not into the romance either. This is another story where tonally things don't match up either because the protagonist's friends are like worried that she's being drugged or being dragged into an abusive relationship or manipulated or joining a cult or something when she describes these experiences she's having. But that doesn't match like the floaty, dreamy, go with it, I'm really attracted to this dude energy she's giving off in the other scenes. And because the two of them don't weave together very well, it kind of yanked me out of the reality of the story as a whole. My number 1 least enjoyed story is going to be Romancing the Stone by Jesica Hayes. I DNF this story at like 85–90%, but I'm going to count it as read because I slogged through a lot of bullshit to get that far in. And this is the one that made me realize I couldn't keep reading any more of these monster romance anthologies short stories because I was just tired and done by the time I got through this. And even though I had had some like really great highs with the top 3 stories, I was hitting a lot of these lows in the back end and I couldn't read another one like this. One of the issues is this also has the same Yuri and the Yeti sad boy vibe, except this time instead of it being our main protagonist, it's the monster gargoyle dude. And I'll grant Gargoyle Boy that he has a much better reason for being sad than Yuri, like his sister was killed. But again, this is like the dark, broody, angsty boy's stereotypical checkbox off the list kind of thing. He can turn to stone, his sister was murdered in front of him. Some other people are coming after this other girl he has soft feelings for. Like, can't you give me anything even a little bit unique or special or original? We're just gonna do the same thing all the time and you're gonna expect me to read it and like it? Like, gross. No world building. We're in some kind of generic, like, medieval English fantasy world in the woods with castles and peasants and crap, but I have no sense of time period or how, like, social class stratus works. So I don't know if our female lead is empowered, like she has equal level of power, or if she's submissive. I don't know if there are serfs or slaves in this world. I don't know how the lord system works. Our protagonist gets abducted by these bad men. I don't know what the stakes are. Do people just get abducted in this world? Are they looking for her specifically and that's why they're taking her? Like, I just don't know. And I don't know how, like, normalized magic and fantasy elements in this world are. Like, should seeing a gargoyle be shocking? Do gargoyles just exist in this world and sometimes you come across them? The way her abductors respond to the gargoyle, they get beat by him and she's saved, and then they immediately come after her again. And it feels like if gargoyles are unusual in this world, that should cause pause for them before going after her again. And if gargoyles are just like a standard fare thing in this world, they still should have paused because they are obviously not prepared to deal with a gargoyle. Because I don't understand this world, I don't understand the society, and I don't really think these characters are real people. They're just like these flat list of checkbox stereotypes to make a story happen. There's no investment or tension. None of this is helped by the fact there are two gargoyle stories in this monster anthology. Bound in Stone by Stephanie Ann Simpson is really good. It's like a 4-star read. And all of the pieces come together. Like, basically, I can't recommend Bound in Stone enough. It's really good. And because it's so good, I was expecting something from this story, especially because the cover is so nice, but it's just not there. Cannot recommend this Romancing the Stone story to anyone. I don't even think it has any steamy scenes in it, and if it did, they were not good. So I've got 5 main takeaways about monster romance and probably fantasy books in general for me going forward. I want good world building. One of the things that I noticed in all 3 of my top favorites is the world building was very solid and engaging. It either made space for the monsters and explained how monsters lived alongside people, or it explained why these monsters were secret from people in a way that felt like believable and natural to the world that had been built around this. And in all of my bottom 3 stories, the world building is just not there. I'm also really interested in character-driven stories, so I want both my characters and my monsters to feel unique. After all, why would I care about a happily ever after if I wasn't invested in the characters who I was reading about? I like monsters that are really monstery, both in look and demeanor. I barely even scratched the surface on my top 3 stories, but all of those monsters had desires and motivations and impulses that weren't like stereotypically or normally things that you would recognize as human. And that's part of what made them interesting and engaging. Their different point of view and where they were going and what they wanted to do. And in my bottom 3 stories, at least 2 of them, the monsters feel more like superheroes or mutants than they do monsters. All of their wants and desires are like very human, very relatable, very like brooding angsty boy or like curious scientist kind of things. Even All Yours were the monsters pretty monstery at first. Like, he gives very vague information and his communication skills as far as like the human to alien one-to-one connection are not very good. When we finally get to the point where we figure out what the monster wants and why it's talking to our protagonist, it is just because they want a life partner, and that's kind of boring. I mean, it's sweet, I guess, if you're invested in the story, but it's like such a human, stereotypical, cliche kind of like thing, and that's all that's driving the story. Just not enough for me. I like things that hold the same or consistent tone, even though most of my favorite in the top 3 are dark or twisted or exploring something a little bit more complicated than a straight love story. Love Laugh Lich is on there, and it's just like a straight funny satire wacky kind of story, and that works too because tonally it's the same the whole time. Meanwhile, like with Yuri and the Yeti, with All Yours, and with Romancing the Stone, there are elements that tonally just did not align together. And I think in fantasy in general, but especially if you're doing a monster romance, You need to work really hard to keep your reader because what you're describing is not realistic. So it's very easy for them to be thrown out of the story. And I apparently have a huge issue with characters that are self-pitying, self-indulgent, and sad all the time. It was really a lot of fun to read all of these monster romance short stories and to get a taste of a bunch of different kinds of monster romance, their tones, their themes, even what they consider monsters is so varied. I'm really not sure how they plan to put it together in a single book. And I definitely recommend you go ahead, take a moment and check these stories out for yourself. Are you following any specific book trends? If so, tell me what they are in those comments down below. And as always, keep reading. Bye!